Good evening, everyone. My name is Eric Phillips, Economic Development Director for Marysville, Union County. Thank you for coming tonight. We have a really good session this evening to talk about impacts of growth, prosperity in our community. And tonight's topic, and keep in mind, you can go to growunioncounty.ohio.com/events. All the previous events, you can see the video as well as the PowerPoint presentations. If you want to see the previous 5 sessions, this is number 6. Number 7 will be next month, of course. And tonight's session is really kind of an interesting discussion about a couple topics that we all know about. We just don't think about sometimes. One is to understand how a community prepares for growth and how it prepares for housing, how it prepares for industrial, commercial growth, and how it's done. And the first session will be Jeremy Hoyt, who's the service director for the city of Marysville, and he'll talk first about how communities prepare for growth and what the city of Marysville's done to prepare for growth. And our second, we have a great panel discussion by two phenomenal superintendents, Lou Kramer from London City Schools and Rich Baird from North Union. They're going to talk about how they prepare for growth and what it means to them, and how schools how schools view growth, and how we can all work together as a community as we grow together, as we prosper together. So those are the topics this evening that we're going to talk about, and exciting topics. So I hope you enjoy this evening. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Jeremy Hoyt, who's the Public Service Director for the city of Marysville, has been here for some time, to talk about the growth in Marysville and what they've done to prepare for it.
Hey, thanks, Eric. Thanks for inviting me out here to public speak. That's always my favorite thing to do. So a little bit about myself. Work for the city since 2009 in various roles. I was assistant city engineer when I started out, city engineer after that. And now I've grown into the role of public service director, a civil engineer by trade, and graduated from Ohio Northern. Just a brief overview of what we're going to be talking about tonight. First topic is going to be comprehensive planning and zoning code rewrite. So that deals with land use. We've got some transportation planning items through our thoroughfare plan process that we're going through, and the already adopted active transportation plan. And then we're going to talk about utilities, which is maybe more of my bread and butter, but the fact that we go through master plans, and then we do hopefully a good job of then using said master plan to reinvest into our infrastructure system. So we'll start off with comprehensive plan, as I mentioned. So what the comprehensive plan does is it provides the residents and city council with a goal of the city. So up on this map, you can kind of see anything yellow is planned to be roughly residential, anything red is commercial, and anything purple is manufacturing / industrial. So as you can see, based on the way the city is currently set up, you've got Scott's in the southeast corner, so it made sense to have some industrial down in that area, commercial along some of our major thoroughfares. So you'll see it by Coleman's Crossing and 36 there on the east side, and then everything else is yellow. So that's planned to be residential. You can also see we did stray outside of the corporation limits. So you can see we tried to instruct our consultant to kind of think in advance in case properties were annexed into the city. So that's where portions, whether it's Stillwater Farms or areas east and north, that's where some of those were brought in as well. So what this does for staff in the community, it provides a future guide so that folks know what their land is slated to be. And again, not to say that that can't change, but that's at least the plan at the time. This was done in 2018. So guide, inform the residents and city staff when developers come in on, hey, this is the plan of city council or planning commission. This is kind of what the future holds for us. And then as well, it helps the city develop a vision for the city based on our own challenges and opportunities. And with that being said, every city is different. So you may go to Delaware's, there may be a little bit different, or Dublin's, but this is what not only staff, but planning commission and city council thought was the best course of action for the city moving forward. So the plan goals, and this comes straight from the comprehensive plan. The plan goals are to retain current residents while attracting new ones, which is always a good thing. Aspire to create a beautiful built environment, strengthen connections between different neighborhoods of Marysville, embrace and preserve Marysville's history and small town feel, and then finally ensure fiscal sustainability for future generations. So from a timeline perspective, we started this process in May of 2017, so a handful of years ago. I know the current thought is somewhere in the next year, 2, 3, we look at updating this to meet current demands and current standards. We had a steering committee, and the folks up there, I don't know if this has a laser pointer, Savannah, but we had steering committee meetings. We had about 6 of those, and there were representatives from City Council, from Union County, both representing the county engineer's office and the commissioners. We had several local attorneys, local businesses, members of the boards and commissions, a local developer, and the school district had a seat at the table as well. All right, so that wraps up, at least from a overall view of a big picture planning from a land use perspective. We also, at the end of that comprehensive plan, then went through a rather detailed zoning code rewrite to kind of match and to condense some zoning districts to make it easier for staff to be able to enforce certain things, but as well to kind of make it easier for everybody involved with a rezoning process. Here, I've got a slide up on transportation planning. So the purpose of transportation planning is to analyze what we've got now. So analyze existing conditions, project future demands. With future demands, that's something everyone in this room could do it one way, and we're all going to see that we're going to hopefully grow, but it could be all done a different way. So it's not exact, but it is a best guess. Another thing we do with transportation planning is to establish access management and traffic impact study guidelines for future developments. So what that does is it shows what the traffic is today. Once we add 100 homes or add a Walmart, what does that do to the traffic? And then how can the developer make improvements to mitigate any issues that they would cause with the increase in traffic generated by their development? And then as well, we also want to consider all modes of transportation. So that's probably a pretty good segue into our active transportation plan. So that was a document that was created internally, actually, where it lays out future sidewalks or future shared use paths so that we can make those connections that we mentioned between the different neighborhoods. So a couple of those that I wanted to point out was on this plan, we had a reservoir connection, which is currently being constructed. So that is going through Mill Valley Central. We're going to put a bridge that's currently under construction over Mill Creek. It's going to go through the water treatment plant and then connect to the reservoir. So that will essentially connect our largest neighborhood to one of our best amenities from a walking and a park perspective at the reservoir. A couple of the other ones that are in the, I guess, preliminary planning stages. Eventually, what we want to do is connect Joint Rec to County Home Road to Cooks Point. So that way, folks from Mill Valley can get out to Joint Rec, and not just Mill Valley, but Scott Farms and several others. So you will see that coming down the road at some point. And then as well, connecting Scott Family Park. So that is the property that was donated. I guess it's 112 acres that was donated to the city just east of State Route 4. On the north side of 33. So that's one that you've seen some activity out there, but our primary focus is being able to not only get vehicles there, but also if folks want to walk from the uptown or ride their bike, we would make a connection essentially into the Jim Simmons Trail. So those are all some pretty exciting projects that are coming up. Next, we've got the thoroughfare plan up there. So our original date was 2012 when that went through and was adopted by City Council. Since then, this one has been one that's been in the queue for a while. We've been working on it since pre-COVID, but things get in the way and some things like that. So this is something that we've since redusted off and are hoping for either a later this year or early 2024 adoption by City Council. So what the thoroughfare plan does from I guess an engineer's perspective, it helps us demonstrate to developers what infrastructure needs are going to be needed. So an example of that is Professional Parkway. So currently it stops in the Keystone Crossing subdivision just on the north side of the airport. For many years, developers would come in and say, hey, is there any way we can just dead end that there? So we had a thoroughfare plan that said, hey, City Council has adopted this thoroughfare plan, you will be required with any development to extend Professional Parkway and essentially make that mini southern bypass for the residents. So good news is that's currently under construction. If you've been out to Benny's, but that was something that the city has $0 in. It was a requirement that we made the developers of the Woodside development put in, and that's one of the strengths of a thoroughfare plan, is to be able to essentially make developers pay their fair share. So with that, you can see it does map out some roads. So it looks like, at some point, maybe as development happens, or maybe if traffic gets to the point that we need to consider starting the project, but it's got a southern bypass that essentially connects Buntsville Middle School, that area, to Scottslawn, keeping everybody off 33 and maybe out of the uptown, but getting them a way to get over to Industrial and Scottslawn, and maybe head that way to go to Coleman's Crossing or something like that. So that's a big one, but a lot of this is planning. So it's maybe not really engineered, but it's connecting points. You can see on the east side, there's a road that essentially is Industrial Parkway, but on the east side of 33. So as development happens, again, this is our way to be able to tell developers, hey, we need some sort of major roadway that's going to connect Scottslawn up to Delaware Avenue. And again, it may meander, it may go a different route, but we're just trying to get and promote the efficient use or efficient travel for any vehicles. Some other things that the thoroughfare plan had in there was, you see at 5 points, it was do a study there, and that's underway. A couple corridor studies that we're also doing from a transportation perspective include West 5th Street. That one will be in our upcoming budget. We've also embarked on a Coleman's Crossing corridor study, as well as State Route 4. And I believe State Route 4, at least the portions that are under consideration, are from Elwood up to County Home Road. So it's more of, we saw what happened with 31, some widening. We had to do some things there. What can we do to make sure that everybody's paying their fair share as areas around State Route 4 continue to develop? So again, a lot of it's just a tool in our toolbox so that we can do our best job to make others or non-city funds stretch a little further and make sure that everybody's paying their fair share. Next slide. This deals with utilities. We do have several utility master plans. I guess in the end, if you look up on the top right, I don't know how many of you know this, but we are the water and sewer provider, not only for the city, so that's the areas in gray, but we also go all the way down to Costco. So anything within Union County is part of the agreement. When we purchased the system from Union County, we were given those utility service areas. So not only from a utility perspective, are we seeing a lot of growth, obviously, within the city, but we're obviously seeing a lot of it in Jerome Township, which seems to be growing and essentially constructing just as many, if not more, houses than what the city is. So the purpose of the utility master plan is to essentially identify areas where we have excess capacity or where we're nearing capacity. If we're nearing capacity, then we have a choice of either A, proposed development can't connect there, or B, hey, how do we improve the capacity so that we can not only serve that development, but then also serve maybe their neighbors in case it expands. The other thing too, our consultants do a very good job of identifying infrastructure upgrades. So trying to make sure that those are obviously as cost effective as possible. But if anybody in the construction industry knows, nothing is cheap in any form or fashion. It also helps us identify future service areas. And similar to the thoroughfare plan, we try to project what that population or what that utility usage is going to be 5, 10, and even 20 years out. So those are very tough. I would say 10 years ago when we projected growth, the master plans that are shown in the bottom right, those master plans said we would be probably double the size that we are now. And again, that was before the housing crisis happened in the late 2000s. But it's something that, again, you'd rather be prepared than not prepared. So with the water master plan, that one was the document. You can see it's black and white, so it's a little bit older, but that was done in 2005. Typically, we try to do those every 10 years. And as you can see, we're currently doing that now. With that being said, the original water master plan said build a new water treatment plant. That was really all it was, and it wasn't needed until last year. So there was no point from staff's perspective to spend money on a water master plan to say, hey, you just need to build a new plant. So once we were able to open that up, we obviously then started the water master plan process. And then as well, wastewater master plan, we did 2 of those. So the original was in 2004 when it mainly focused on the city. 2007, we added the county to it. And again, a big thing from those wastewater master plans said, build the water reclamation facility. So we were able to use that with council support, be able to build both the water plant and the water reclamation facility for today's needs, but for needs for many, many years. And with the wastewater master plan, we did do an update where essentially we just had them start from scratch, and that was adopted in 2020. Capital improvements, I alluded to that earlier. As you can see up here, we've got the water treatment plant. So the water treatment plant was about $43 million. We opened up bids right at peak COVID. So it was about a month after everybody was shut in. Probably the smartest thing we could have done. We probably got lucky from a timing perspective. The plant was bid out at $40.5 million, as I mentioned. By the time we were done, our contractor said that is a $60 million plant. So I think contractors were super aggressive, not really fully understanding the ramifications of COVID. And really the big thing with us moving out of the North Main Street location primarily was it was an older water plant. It was built in the 1890s. Our capacity was capped at 4 million gallons. Now we're up to 7.5, and we can easily expand up to 10. And it provides our staff with a much more efficient process. So easier for us to manage and creates additional capacity. So it was essentially a no-brainer to make that happen. And to be honest, we were very lucky. Somewhere right around the beginning of June, we had some really drought-like conditions, if you guys will recall. And our 4 million gallons, that was our peak, was at 6. So with everybody watering their lawns, whether it's in the city or primarily in Jerome Township, the water demands, we would not have been able to keep up this year for that. So another thing, I guess that project took about, right around 24, 27 months to complete. So guys are happy with it and find that we're getting used to it, but it's much more easy to operate. Next one, Jerome Township Water Tower. So many people ask, well, why is the City of Marysville logo down in Jerome Township? Well, it is our water tower and it's our infrastructure. So that's the water tower that you will see if you're driving down to Costco, just probably about a mile north of Post Road. So that was just recently completed in late 2022. What that does is it allows us to store water there, which helps with pressure down in Jerome Township, but then it also provides redundancy. So with the redundancy, I don't know how many of you folks drive in from Dublin, but Industrial Parkway was closed today because we had a water main break right at the Flott Road water tower. Without this water tower, we would have had thousands of customers that were knocked out of service, or we would have had to have gone to Delco to try to get an emergency interconnect. So the redundancy is very important. We were able to isolate the water line that had essentially a baseball-sized hole in it, and we were able to have everything run off of this water tower. So we were very thankful that we've got that. And then another key component with this is, after all of this investment in our water system, we have not even considered raising any utility rates, whether that be the user rates for every gallon or cubic foot that you use, or capacity fees, which are assessed to every development that wants to connect to our system. And all of this investment could not have been done without City Council's support. So without them authorizing us to have and spend money, we are unable to do the things that are for the betterment of the community, our water system, and our utility system. And then finally, this is a map of capital improvements for the wastewater system. This map is pretty complex, but for the most part, sanitary sewers and wastewater, they just want to flow downhill and go to the lowest point. Well, if you've driven up and down Industrial Parkway, it is super flat. So essentially we have to put in a pump station where it pumps the wastewater up to another gravity sewer, but it's a daisy-chained system, if you will. So with that, when we purchased the system, nobody, or at least in the early 90s, could not have foresawn the growth that particularly Jerome Township would have seen. So what we've been doing is recently investing in a lot of pump stations to make them bigger, better technology, but to mainly be able to keep up with the demands of the system. So a lot of the money was spent, and we're right now at about $40 million and fixing existing deficient infrastructure, again, outdated and undersized, make it more efficient, and provide an ease of maintenance while being able to handle the growth within the city. See. So a couple examples of that. We've got Pump Station 2. You can see the new water tower. Thankfully, we were able to secure enough land with the water tower purchase that we would be able to also put a pump station on there. So we were able to relocate a pump station across the street that looked like an outhouse and make it much more modern and able to handle the capacity demands that we have. And then with that being said, that's about 5,500 acres that we can now serve in the future as Jerome Township continues to grow. And then as well, another project, if you are driving up 33 towards Delaware Avenue, you don't see it anymore, but there was a big pile of dirt there for a while. And we are building another pump station there just east of the apartments that you see there. So one of the, I guess the key with that one, it's a brand new pump station, but we were able to take, or will be able to take, 2 existing pump stations offline. So currently we have what we call the Square Drive pump station. Essentially, it is a small little pump station that's smack dab in the middle of Culver's parking lot. It is very deep and tough to get into. So with that being said, and it's small, we were able to eventually, you'll see a sewer go down 36 and then behind URE and connect into this. But we'll be able to take that offline, which is one less thing that we have to deal with, while making a Watkins Road pump station, as we're calling it, that's going to be designed to serve in the future much of the area between Mill Creek and 33 in that neck of the woods. So definitely something that's exciting. The pump station should be done probably by early next year, but all of the sewers and force mains that are required, those should be starting pipes getting delivered next week. So that project should be done somewhere around this time next year. So definitely exciting. Doing our best to keep up with the demands, not only from a roadway perspective, but then also from a water and sewer perspective. So.
Jeremy, thank you. I'm going to ask you a really difficult question here, but so why have you been in Marysville so long? What drives you to be here so long?
For Marysville, to be honest, it's the growth and working with great people. Our city council is great. Terry, the city manager, is great, and they kind of let us do cool stuff. So we're growing. We're not just fixing potholes, but we're trying to figure out a way to make everything better for the rest of the community. And sorry, I got one more slide, but this really just shows our recent investments. So when you factor in the water reclamation facility, the water treatment plant, all of those, and again, we spent $120 million on the water reclamation facility in 2009. So that's probably about $200 million today, even a little bit more. But in the end, present day value, we're looking around 350 million. But again, when you do some of these projects like a water reclamation facility or water treatment plant, those are going to be here way long after everybody in this room are gone. So it's nice to work on something that isn't just like a temporary fix, but it's something that's going to be here for many, many years.
It's great to see the city reinvest in the community and the infrastructure. Time for a couple questions here, but I will say that Jeremy Hoyt will run circles around other service directors. This guy is a rock star and does amazing work, and I'd put him up against any public service director in the state of Ohio. So nice to have him and great to have him. So any questions from anyone in the crowd? Terry, oh my gosh, his boss is going to ask a question. This might be a tough one.
Make it a softball, please.
It's really more of a continuation of Jeremy's presentation. Well before I was here and became here, and Jeremy, probably 16, 17 years ago, is when the city really made a conscious effort to prepare for ultimately the growth and the development that was going to come. And so that $230 to $250 million of infrastructure that the city has spent over the last 16, 17 years has put us in probably one of the more appealing positions in the entire Columbus region for growth and smart growth. And we're very appealing to not only developers, but people want to come live in Marysville. One of the concerns that we have as we had have a development that's going to have a referendum go to the ballot in November. One of the concerns you have is when you invest this type of money into the preparation for the growth, and when these developments come in and they meet the expectations of your comprehensive plan, and there's referendums that may not allow those to occur, then as you go on in time, if that's the thought process that the community's fearful of the growth, then the pressure of paying for these investments are going to fall on the existing residents, because we've been able to hold our rates for a long time, and we envision not having to do anything with our rates, user rates, for many years. But it's contingent on the growth and the development. So if that stops for some reason through referendums and other opportunities to grow, then the increase in those rates that will ultimately have to happen will fall on our existing residents. And that's just plain fact. So anything else to add to that?
The only
Jeremy?
thing, yeah, I guess I'd be remiss if I didn't say it, but everything water related, the water treatment plant and the reservoir, I think we've owned the water treatment plant property for 20 or 25 years. All of that was started by our predecessors, not only on city council, but previous service directors. So there's been a plan, and we've definitely followed through with everything for many, many years.
Another question, Paige first. We're going to do 2 questions right here.
Thanks, Eric. My question isn't a question. It's a comment that I want to echo that Terry had made. City of Canal Winchester was on the very edge of bankruptcy for exactly the situation that Terry had just described. They put in a huge water treatment plant, based on anticipated fees and revenues coming from development. The development stopped. We went through the 2006, 7, and 8 period, almost bankrupt the community. So Terry, I know a lot on your shoulders, but the message that we've tried to get, I think, and Eric, I'm speaking on your behalf, with our various meetings, is to let our community citizens know that growth is very positive. It's coming here. And how we plan for it, Jeremy, outstanding presentation tonight, in my opinion, but we have to keep our eye on the ball, because the risk it can be astronomical if we're not managing that correctly.
Thank you.
I think you're voting for a roadshow, a Jeremy roadshow here. We got one more question here.
Hi there, Jeremy.
Yeah.
This is maybe more a curiosity, so if I have it, maybe some other people do too. So I know you said the services extend to Jerome Township and such. So as a Union County resident, I live just north of town, right on Hillview Road. So I'm on a well, but obviously if we're extending these services for water and such to distances into Jerome, how are those residents billed for the city water and these services? I'm just ignorant to that. So I'm just curious, how is that? So maybe other
Yeah,
people know
I can
how
give you a
that's handled.
summary. So I guess the key thing in Jerome Village, we don't put in any water line. The developer puts it in and then essentially dedicates it to us. So the city really doesn't invest in water lines or sewer lines other than making repairs on new ones unless it's needed for much bigger thing. As it relates to the billing, real quick, the water rate is the same in the county as it is in the city. The wastewater rate's 10% higher. On tap fees, it's 10% higher on water tap fees for county residents versus city residents, and it's 20% higher on the wastewater tie-in. So for you to tie in. Oh, yes. Yep. So we bill them, but they're charged at a higher rate because they're not within the corporation limits. Yes, that's correct. Yeah. So they don't get like stormwater and a couple other things like that. But yeah, they get billed for what they use. So it'd be no different than the county. Like Columbia Gas sending you a bill. It's just we're the utility provider. That's a good question. Yes.
Yeah, and the reason why we have lines down in Jerome Township is because the county actually owned the water and sewer system. I think it was 96, Steve, right? That we extended those to stop annexation potentially from Dublin, I think was the primary purpose, and to open up an industrial area. And that's kind of legacy. And then the county sold the system to the city to run the water and sewer system in that area. That's why we have lines in that area. Jeremy, thank you. We're going to switch gears here. Let's give Jeremy a round of applause. So tonight we do have, again, two superintendents. We have great schools in Union County, and although Lou's not in Union County with his school district, he's done some great work at London City Schools. We do have Savannah, who's going to ask some questions, or we'll let them each speak, and then from that we'll ask them some questions and then open up to the public as well. But again, think about schools as infrastructure too. If you don't have great schools, that's part of your infrastructure you need to have to support growth in your community. Great schools mean great communities, no question about it. So this is a very important topic we want to talk about tonight.
Good afternoon, everyone. So as I said, Savannah Allen, I work on his team, on the economic development team. So thanks to the panel tonight to speak in. Great job from Jeremy on the city development update. So just wanted to kick it off here and have you guys introduce yourselves and talk about your history of the last 2 years or so with the
Well, first of all, Jeremy mentioned that he doesn't like to get up and speak to people, but it's been like 25 minutes. And so I would say all evidence to the contrary. Rich and I are different. We're superintendents. We speak to people all the time. I can't tell you everyone listens, but I can tell you that we have many opportunities to make presentations. I'm very glad to hear, Gamer, I'm the superintendent of the London City School District. If you go out of the main doors and you take a right, and you travel for about 20 to 25 minutes, stop when you see all the schools in the center of Madison County. That's us. I've been the superintendent of Madison County starting my 9th year and 28th year total in education. And I was attracted to I've been a superintendent for 13 years, and I was a superintendent of a district outside of Springfield in Clark County. And I was attracted to the opening in London because as I looked at Metro Columbus, I looked at the contiguous counties around Metro Columbus and saw and witnessed all of the growth. And Madison County was really an untouched gem, and they had an opening. And when I was asked, I said no. But then my daughter, as we lived in Mechanicsburg, said I would really like to attend and go to school with my classmates as she was going into high school. And I called back and I said yes. And the more I did some research about London and where the city was going and what was poised to grow, and what I've experienced over the last 9 years, I got more and more excited. So I, like anyone, and I heard Jeremy say this about his relationship with Marysville, I went in and talked to people, and ultimately my decision to come there rested on the potential for growth. It was exciting for me as a superintendent to be a part of that, to be a decision maker in a community, in a school district as a part of that process. And then also the people, just getting to know the people and to be able to share that experience with the people as well. One note before I'll let Rich go. We moved to Mechanicsburg in 2006 when I became the high school principal. I have a fondness for Marysville, former parishioner here. Our pediatrician still is in Marysville. Our eye doctor is still in Marysville. Because I was the high school principal in Mechanicsburg, I didn't want to work out with my kids in Urbana, so I was a Y member here in Union County. And so over the last 17 years, I've watched Marysville become Marysville, and it's been exciting. So I have a fondness for the community here and appreciate the invitation.
Good evening. I'm Rich Baird, and Jeremy, thank you for your presentation. For somebody who doesn't like to speak, you do a great job. I love to speak, so get comfortable. I've been at North Union Local School District for 8 years. We are a school district that doesn't have the population growth that you speak of. We benefit from the growth south of us in Marysville. If you draw a line from New Dover to West Mansfield, a jagged line, that's our southern border of our district. We go all the way up to the top of the county on each side. That's why they call us North Union. We have 166 square miles. We have 2 villages, Magnetic Springs and Richwood, and several drive-through towns along 31 and Route 4 and 347. And when you talk about growth, you also talk about progress. Well, we can talk about that later. My career has been 34 years. 8 years at North Union. I spent 12 years with Dublin City Schools, a couple years with Marysville Schools, a couple years with Ridgemont. I was in Madison County at Madison Plains 1 year. So for me, the attraction to coming back to North Union and Union County was I was coming home. And I moved here in 1975. So I was here before the Honda plants opened, and I got to watch all that growth. I got to watch my classmates be some of the first hired at Honda. I taught here while the growth was really thriving from Honda. I got to watch some of the families that I knew that really struggled thrive, not only thrive financially because of the growth in the county, but they also thrived in education and in their wellness and their emotions. To me, that's the biggest benefit of growth, and that's what really attracted me. I always set that as a standard because I grew up here, but as I went to Dublin, as I went to Madison County, as I went to Ridgemont, I set that as the standard in my mind of what kind of growth and what I would expect to see as an educator. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, I get that.
So I appreciate your perspectives on that and kind of talking about the growth that you've experienced both by being a teacher and just living in a community. In Ohio, only 10% of the school districts are growing. So with your experience in your past educational roles and currently where you're superintendent, how does that, what are the advantages of being in a growing school district? And then how does that compare to school districts that are either stagnant or declining?
Well, I mentioned one of the draws to my current position was exactly the potential of growth and being able to make those decisions. I don't think this is hyperbole, but if you could, and this is overstating, but if you could go back and be the superintendent of Olentangy before Olentangy became Olentangy, and you had the idea to make those decisions, wouldn't that be something that'd be exciting? Now, London's not going to grow and build an elementary school every 4 years. But since the time that I've been here and beginning my 9th year again, we had 2,000 students when I began, and we're approaching 2,300 students now. And so that's some significant growth. That growth is from really 2 reasons. The most of the growth is because we're doing a better job of providing educational opportunities, extracurricular opportunities, co-curricular opportunities for our students, and more students are choosing to stay within the district, and we're attracting more students from outside of the district. When I was hired, the board wanted me to think of a mindset. I'm thinking about the business forum that we're in here, and it was really very much like a business aspect. They wanted the district to be a destination district, people to come in. At the time, we were losing 80 students, lost 80 students a year who were attending other schools. we flip that around, and so now we have a surplus of 80 students that are coming into our district because they're making the choice. We have, because of that, of course, as you look at the net, we have more people choosing to stay and take advantage of the opportunities that we're working really hard to build. And so that 160 student swing is a big part of enrollment. Mix in another 100 students in just residential growth that we see. And for us, as a school district, when you look at property tax, income tax, all of those things are good for us. Our target is modest, sustainable growth. That growth is good. As you mentioned, we're one of 10% of districts in the state of Ohio that are growing. And it's not as though we're growing leaps and bounds. We are growing modestly over time. And for us, from a fiscal standpoint, along with some say, savvy decisions, we've put ourselves into a really good economic situation where we can continue to double down on those opportunities that we can provide our students. And also, because we're the county seat, London about 11,000 residents, so think much smaller than where we are now, but also provide services that residents of the city, of our school district, can consider assets. And we'll talk about that more and about the relationship of the school district and city. But we really view ourselves in a partnership with the city to provide our residents, our constituents, a good quality of life, to benefit from our facilities and some of our services as well. So I hope I adequately dodged the question, Savannah.
So North Union has 1,500 students. I may have said that. We bring in 300 open enrolled students. So anybody in the state of Ohio can come to North Union if they want. If there's room, we'll take them. We lose about 100 students to open enrollment around us. So we net about 200. So that helps offset. The stagnant is definitely the wrong word for North Union, because although the population growth isn't happening, we are progressing in a lot of ways. For example, one of the things I love about the growth around us is we have a business advisory council that meets 4 times a year, and we talk about opportunities for our kids. And our job is to prepare productive citizens. And we not only get to prepare them and challenge them while they're there, but we can empower them by giving them opportunities close to home. Okay, so if I was a superintendent interviewing for a job 10 years ago, which I almost was, I guess it was 9 years ago, time goes fast, and I walked in and said, you know what, maybe we shouldn't be preparing kids for college only. Maybe we should think about their career readiness before we think about putting them $100,000 in debt. I'd have been, do you have any other questions for us, Mr. Baird? And I would have left and never. But now that is our primary role. So ACT, the test that you take, has always told us that career readiness and college readiness are the exact same thing. Okay, I even disagree with that. And anecdotally, if you think about that, how hard is it to go sit in a freshman English class in college? And how hard is it to sit and do a productive job that first year out of high school? I would challenge that it's harder to do that first job out of high school. And I've been in that freshman English class. It was difficult, but having that first job, we've got to prepare them for that. So we have a great career center that we use, Tri-Rivers. Ohio High Point is right here. They use tolls. Those are great opportunities for kids. Many pathways they can choose from there. We've also added in those pathways within our schools. And what does that have to do with the growth around us? Well, I can go to any meeting in our county and you could fill in the blank and they end up saying, we need workers. I'm from manufacturing. We need workers. I'm from landscaping. We need workers. I'm from performing arts. We need workers. So we've developed 7 pathways within our school, including healthcare, information technology, engineering, agriculture, business, I'm on the spot. We do college credit. They get college credit within the school, and they are thriving right out of high school into those careers. Some of them are going to four-year universities. Some of our healthcare kids will become doctors. Some of them are already working as nurses, state licensed nurses assistants. So what growth does is gives our kids that empowerment to take their skills and work. The other thing, and I told you I spent 12 years in Dublin City Schools, and what I truly loved about Dublin City Schools, that was an established, growing community while I was there, was the unbelievable amount of diversity that it added to the community. So I could walk into one of our classes at Sells Middle School and observe, or ask the kids, raise your hand, how many of you speak another language? And 10 out of 20 would raise their hand because they are native speakers of another language. And they got to sit and work in groups with, so I'm a kid from Marysville, but moved to Dublin. Okay. I'm sitting with a kid that lived in China. I'm sitting with a kid that lived in Bangladesh, and I'm sitting with a kid from Mexico. Okay. That's like United Nations right there. That was the biggest opportunity I saw for growth. And what it brings to a community. It brings different perspectives. It brings different ideologies. It brings different cultures. It brings different food. The food was fantastic. But so the two biggest things that I love about growth in a community are the opportunities for our kids, number one. And number two, no, I'd say diversity is number one. The opportunities for kids, number two. I don't know. They're tied for number one.
Talking about your business advisory council, talking with different businesses that need students. So how important is it to have the relationship with businesses as we transition from being college prepared to career prepared?
Well, we approach that a couple of different ways. I won't expand on the Business Advisory Council. That's important to us as well. One of the things that we look at is integrating into our curriculum opportunities with our business partners. So we've tried to develop on our own a thriving internship program that's available for our students. The other thing is really, I guess, maybe one more thing that's illustrative of how we view business partnership and development in our community. I sit on our economic development committee for our county. So it was important for me, and the board felt it was important for me to be a board member for Madison County Future Inc. So that we would be, say, a seat at the table and an active partner when we're out entertaining opportunities about growth in our county, but growth specifically in my school district and in our cities. So we've tried to engage those conversations, whether it be on a leadership standpoint with businesses, with the idea for the betterment of our community, but also to expand those educational opportunities that our students could provide.
Business partnerships are everything to a school, to our kids. Business advisory councils are one thing. Internships are another great thing that are really around the corner for all students in Ohio. It's becoming a requirement. It's part of how we will be evaluated. But the partnerships that you make can't be just about high school. I'm getting a job here. I'm getting an internship here. Our business partnerships, and I'm sure Lou's as well, is a pre-K to 12 partnership. So one of my favorite days is when the businesses from around town and our agencies from around town come into our parking lot, and the kids get to see the vehicles that they drive. This is what you drive if you are a construction worker. This is what you drive if you're a heavy machine operator. This is what you drive if you're a policeman. And they get to go up and look at all of it and, turn on the lights. And none of them have turned on the car yet. but it's a pre-K to, yeah, it's a pre-K to 12 opportunity. Fifth grade, they sit with our business partners, and our business partners interview them for a job. Okay. And I get to be one of the business partners. I hired a fifth grade student as a teacher. So she became a teacher in no, she didn't, but she could have.
What's the licensure?
So she,
made.
but we got to sit there and interview the kids. Richwood Bank was right beside me interviewing. Ohio National Guard was sitting there, and the kids' perspective and the partner's perspective completely changed after those interviews. For example, I noticed in the interviews, when you talk about strengths and what you can do for a job, I heard a lot of, I'm really good at riding a skateboard. I'm the best, whatever the video game at that time was, I'm the best video game player of that. And you got the opportunity to say, hey, play is great. How does that work into your workforce skills? Our kids get into 7th grade. They're all in what we call a career connections class. With the help of our chamber, we were able to give them all youth science, where we can figure out what their aptitudes are, what their interests are, match them up, look at whole classes. And then in high school, they're well informed as they're choosing their career pathway. And even when they're in high school, if they make the wrong choice, that's the greatest place to make the wrong choice. We had a healthcare kid. He his mom was a nurse. He wanted to be a nurse. He went to clinicals, saw what you see when you go to clinicals. He came back and told me, I'm not going to be a nurse. But what a great time to discover that before he invested all that money and time into that. And he's a very successful engineer now. So, yeah.
So we're going to open it up for questions now. There's going to still a mic, so any questions?
I have a question for him, of course, but every community in the world does tax incentives, and there's been a lot of discussion in this community about tax incentives and their effectiveness, and should we do them, should we not do them? Schools are impacted with tax incentives. And how do you talk about business partnerships? Do you see a tax abatement or a tax increment financing district as a partnership, or how do you view that?
So it's really hard to talk about that without talking about school funding as a whole. So the federal government requires every state to have the opportunities for students, for the residents of the state to have a free and public education. Okay, that's a requirement. Every child has the opportunity for a free and equitable and fair public education. Okay, that costs money. So, most school districts are paying between $10,000 and $11,000 a student. Okay, so the states are charged with that. So the state has a legislature that has to make laws to make sure that schools have, or that kids have schools to go to. Okay, so the state says this is our plan. Ohio's plan has not been legal for a long time. A judge found it 20 years ago, I think, to be illegal, more than that. So the state legislature has been working toward that. And the crux, here's how it works. So the state says, we're going to give you $6,500 a student. That's what we think it costs to educate a student. Okay. But a lot of you can raise local money yourself. So we got to make it fair. Some communities don't have a big tax base to raise a lot of local money. Some areas have a lot of tax base. So we're going to reduce the amount of money the state gives you based on your tax base and raise it so it isn't really built to help growing school districts. So a lot of it comes down on the local tax revenue, which is the most complicated and most difficult to raise. So all those benefits we talked about with growth are absolutely necessary and wonderful things. But we have to work with our local community to help us get there, because the state funding goes down when the tax base goes up. That's a very simple explanation of a very complex funding formula. So we want growth. We want the positives. Growth has to come with tax incentives. We have to keep the schools in mind when we make those tax incentives. So the real fix isn't and shouldn't because it isn't charged with the local communities. The real charge is with that state legislature on how to fairly fund schools so every kid in the state of Ohio has a fair and equitable opportunity for education. And we have great economic development directors like Eric that attract good business to our community and get them here and are willing to work with the schools as they develop that. So North Union, we are, like I said, our population staying about the same. So we actually benefit from the funding formula in that way. But the funding formula, remember that tax base goes up, the money coming in from the state goes down, which puts a little bit more on locals. Now, it's easier to, you know, I always hear it's easier to collect that local money. That is the most difficult money to raise. And we don't fundraise for our schools. So that's all we get is that revenue. So tax incentives are vital to our community, vital to the growth, and a positive thing. And I can tell you, what do we meet? Twice a year, 4 times a year? I sit in on all the tax incentive meetings, and as well as the Marysville schools and Fairbanks local schools. And so we're always at the table.
And Lou, and thank you, Rich, great answer. I know, Lou, you're dealing with some tax abatements in the downtown area of London, some CRA tax abatements. I think you guys are dealing with that right now as we speak, right?
We are. So for us, it really comes down to relationships. I've been fortunate when I came in. I also came in about the same time the mayor did, about the same time the CEO of the hospital did, about the same time the police chief did, about the same time the chamber president, who's now economic development, did. And so all of us have been kind of in there at about the same time. And I'm fortunate that I serve a community where there is a healthy give and take about the betterment for all of those, sometimes honestly competing entities. And so you reference revitalization of downtown. And so the city came to us with a need, said we're working with a developer that has the opportunity, very big interest in developing our downtown. Just honestly walk out into the sidewalk and think about the potential in my community of what you have here. And we don't talk about this in my community, but if you go down, there's this Plain City place down over there. We don't talk because we're rivals about the school district that that community is attached to. We don't talk about that. It's that school up north in Madison County. But if you think about that downtown, there's an opportunity for us that would really benefit our community. And so there's been some asks, and our board, our really outlook is that this is a really healthy opportunity for us that we need to support the city on. And the retrospect, or I guess conversely, we're slated for 900 homes, apartments, condos, you name it, living areas in the next 8 years just in the city. And our city will grow first. Our rural areas that the district represents will then, once we get regional sewer and water in the next 2 to 4 years, will experience some growth as well. And then the city and our other partners think about the district and residential growth and what that means for us. And so it's a relationship driven between organizations, between leadership of those organizations, and there is a give and take. I think a healthy, productive give and take for our community into what's necessary for all of us to prosper.
It's awesome hearing from both of you. You're both engaged and involved in that. That's so critical so the city and the county and the schools all work together collectively. It's so important. Okay, questions. I hog that question big time. Who has a question? Paige, you got a question, right? You're an education guy.
Well, I know Rich, and I know the success that he's had, and I haven't had the opportunity to meet with you. I served on the Tolles Board of Education for 3 years. It's great to see how our schools and partnerships are working with businesses to help our students and give them the opportunities. And what I'm seeing in the 49 career centers that we have in the state of Ohio, many of those career centers have students where 50% of them are going on to a secondary form of education. So the classic line of you know, my kid's not going there because, you know, that's for kids that can't make it. Getting that message out and getting the state to continue to support our career centers and not use those as the first choice of cutting dollars in the budget. And that falls on the two of you. And I know you're fighting for that opportunity to keep it going. But I encourage you to comment on that and just how can we as citizens help you in that effort?
So I'm going to give you a perspective of a young teacher, probably back in 2010. We were at Bowling Green State University. Okay. I was with the human resources director in Dublin City Schools, and another couple of principals were there. And we went on a spiel about Dublin, and we said one of our spiels was 94% of our students go on to a 4-year university. And that young lady sat there and looked at me straight in the eye, and she said, "What do you do with the other 6%?" And the human resources director reached into his briefcase, got a contract out, and had her sign it. So that mindset, she had that mindset, is what I'm saying. And every kid needs that opportunity to succeed, and every vocation has that opportunity to succeed. And the way you look at it, the reason we call them pathways is you're getting on 33, okay? You might get off at the Scotts Lawn exit and go to work right away. You might go on down the road a little bit more and get off the next exit and get your 2-year associate's degree. Go down the road a little bit more, get off the next exit, have a 4-year degree. There might be quite a bit of time between, okay? But I will tell you, the career centers that are offering the opportunities and credentials, they are putting kids to work while they're in school. We as school district comprehensive schools want to do the same thing. At the same time, the workforce is still saying, we don't have enough workers. We don't have enough workers. So we really have to put those two together and say, they're here. We've got them.
In order specifically to support career centers like Tolles or High Point or what have you, talk to your representative, talk to your state senator. Make sure that when the biennium budget comes up, that those areas are supported and that funding is secure.
Okay, so that's looking at time. We're going to have to cut it off here, but I'm certain if you have questions of Jeremy and the superintendent, they'll hang around to ask any, you want to ask them any questions. Our next session, I believe, is August 16th. A sneak peek. We do have Bruce Daniels and Chad Hoffman, who will be talking about how growth impacts their business from a retail, from a service perspective. We also have a small business there as well to talk about what growth means to them from a service retail standpoint. So again, welcome to that's at 5:30 here at the Avalon. And let's give our superintendents a round of applause. That passion, we need to bottle all that passion up there because it's really good passion for our students. But thank you all for coming.